And he said, oh, no. He only thought you'd go to college and you take Shakespeare and quantum physics and all these neat things. And so he didn't go to classes for the first week. He just sat in this tent with his girlfriend in the dorm. And I thought, I could never do that. I could never be that brave. Well, Steve was more like a true hippie of the day, a counterculturist, kind of going through life with a lot of friends, and everybody lives on nothing and has almost nothing, no money, and just some sandals, and lives the very, very, very simple life. And so and me, I admired all the counterculture thinking of those days, but I didn't become it. I was still going to be middle of the road, feet on the ground, an engineer, have a home someday, have a family, but I really admired the thinking. My head was very free and open. So he somehow talked them into letting him stay at Reed College for a couple of years with no money for dorms and no money for tuition. But they liked him. If you're persuasive and people like you, you can get a lot of things. And he always got lots of things easy by being who he is. And he's very impressive and intelligent. Well, I'm back at Hewlett-Packard, and my love in life is engineering, and I'm so shy and such a geek that I'm never going to have a girlfriend or a wife. So when I came home from work on calculators, I went to work on other projects that I loved in electronics. I just did it. I worked on hotel movie systems for friends. I did all of this for free. I would just take jobs and fly to LA and design some digital stuff for the first hotel movie systems when nobody had ever seen a movie in a hotel in their life. I got to work on the early VCRs before anybody ever saw a VCR. The first consumer VCR was not the Sony Betamax. It was an American company called Cartrivision. Built them into some Sears TVs, went bankrupt right away, and we Hewlett-Packard engineers could go down and buy them in San Jose for $60 each, a color VCR, when black and white ones cost $1,000 for schools. Incredible opportunity. I started the first dial-a-joke in the San Francisco Bay Area. You'll meet a lot of people who have started companies, but this is the only time in your life you'll meet someone who was the first person to start a dial-a-joke in a regional area, where you can dial a number. I take credit for that one. You dial this number, and I would tell a Polish joke. Hello, thank you for dialing dial-a-joke. And then the Polish-American Congress complained, and I said, what if I switch into Italian jokes? And they said, that's fine. This was before political correctness. And dial-a-joke, well, I did this in 1972 when it was illegal in the United States to own, use, or purchase your own telephone. It was illegal in the United States to own, use, or purchase your own answering machine. So it was, I had to lease the one machine that the phone company offered, and it cost as much as my apartment rental. You know, imagine you're just out of college and you're paying for an apartment, and then you have to pay again that amount just for an answering machine. But I was so into humor, I wanted to run the first dial-a-joke, and I ran it for a couple of years. And because it was like a chat room, I was anonymous. All these people were calling, they didn't know who I was. And so I could come home from work and take calls live, and I actually met my first wife that way. And prankster as I am, the first thing I said to her was, I can hang up before you, and I did. Steve Jobs, before that, I went into a bowling alley with Alice, and there was a Pong game. The first time ever I saw a little TV screen playing a game, and my jaw opened. I couldn't believe it. Television set can play a game? Who ever heard of that? Pinball games were all we had before that. And as I stared at it, I said, I could build one of those, because I know digital electronics, and I know television signals from high school. I can build my own Pong. I'm going to build my own. I couldn't afford one, so I had to build it. And I did, and it was, very few chips, and I even put in a couple of proms from work and had programmed them so that when you missed the ball, it spelled a 4-letter word like heck. Steve Jobs came back from Oregon, and he's the sort of person, I told him all about Pong and everything. He went down to Atari and got a job. So that quickly. And so he was in there kind of like fixing up the machines they designed. He wasn't quite engineer level. And he came to me one day and he said, Nolan Bushnell, who owns Atari, wants you to design a game. He's sick and tired of his own engineers designing games with 100 chips, 120 chips, 150 chips, 180 chips. He wants small ones, and he knows you design things small. And Steve described to me this one-player Pong game called Breakout. And I said, oh my God, it'd be the greatest thing in my life to design a game that people are going to play in bowling alleys and stuff. Kids are going to play. How incredible. And Steve said, well, there's a hitch. We have to build it in 4 days and nights. It wasn't software back then. It was hardware. little chips with voltages that went high and low, and you had to hook wires to make other chips go high and low to get signals into a TV set that showed up as balls and paddles. That was a 6-man month job. So 4 days and nights. I didn't think I could do it, but I sat down, started designing. We didn't sleep for 4 days, either one of us. We both got the sleeping sickness, mononucleosis. We delivered a working breakout game to Atari. While I was there, I was kind of, you know how you are when you're falling asleep and you're hardly awake and your mind's drifting? It's almost like you're I don't know, it's almost like you're hypnotized, sort of hallucinogenic or something. All the games in Atari at that time were built with black and white TV sets, little dots going in black and white. And I went to the factory floor, and this one game had a bunch of mylar on the screen, red, green, blue, orange. And as the ball went across the screen, it was changing colors like a rainbow. And I was just mesmerized by this color effect. Color is so important in the world. And then into my head popped an idea of a way to take a little $1 chip, spin it around at the right speed, and get all sorts of signals out that would look like color on an NTSC television, Arts in American television. So I filed that idea away. Next thing, after breakout, Steve Jobs and I went to visit a friend who said he had something big to show us, and he's down in a basement typing on the big teletype machine, and he says, I'm playing chess with a computer in Boston. And he was on the ARPANET, the early forerunner of today's internet. And he brought up a list of computers, Stanford, Berkeley, UCLA, Illinois, MIT was on there, about 12 computers, and you could log on. It's that getting far away thing that makes you super powerful and superhuman. And I said, I drooled, and I said, I have to have this. So I went home, and instead of designing a game that put balls and paddles on my home TV, and I had no money at all. Steve Jobs and I were in our young 20s, realized we had no savings account, we had no checking account, really. We had no cars we owned, we had zero. So the only output device I ever had was my television, because it was free. I already owned it. Televisions didn't have video in those days. You had to take it apart, scope around, find where to put the video signal in, inject it, and you'd get a picture on your screen. And I just redesigned my game. I designed a new product that would put letters of the alphabet, words, on my television set. And then I bought a keyboard for a huge amount of money, and I could type, and through a modem that I built, I could type to that computer in Boston or Stanford or wherever, or Berkeley, and I could type and run the programs that were for guests, and it would type back to my television set. And I was so happy, and I hardly ever used it. I just wanted to actually create it more than I needed to use it. Steve Jobs came along and said, why don't we sell this design to a local time-sharing computer company? And we did, and got some money for it. So it was a TV terminal of my own. Now a friend came to me and said a group of people are getting together that are interested in things like TV terminals, video terminals. I thought, wow, I'm so shy. I never talked to anyone, but I love showing off my devices, and then people talk to me. So I said, I'll go. It was the Homebrew Computer Club. We started in Menlo Park. It was a rainy night. The garage door was open. And everybody was talking about one of these geeky-looking front panel little computers based on a microprocessor. And I had not followed microprocessors, so I felt very shy. I was the only one in the room that didn't know what this meeting was about. It was about the Altair 8800 thing that called itself a computer, but it was really just a glorified microprocessor with switches and lights for ones and zeros and buttons you could push to get them into memory. And I thought back, I built that computer 5 years before. But so I took home a data sheet for a microprocessor, and that night I found out that a microprocessor was roughly the mini computers I used to design in high school. I said, I'm in business. Oh my God, that computer I wanted my whole life. Now I see the path to get it. And I took my video terminal and I redesigned it to put a microprocessor and some memory, a little startup program like our Hewlett-Packard calculators, so I could now type to my own computer and it could type to my TV set. And in the Intel world, the other machines that were coming out, the hobby kits, were usually based on the Intel chips, and Bill Gates had written a BASIC for it. We knew his name. This little hobby community, a few people here, a few people there, hardly anyone, not even thousands of people in the country maybe, followed these new developing microcomputers, and Bill Gates' name was famous. He had written a BASIC. And I thought, wow, if I write a BASIC for my microprocessor, I'll get famous. So I had never programmed in BASIC, by the way. I had to learn the language, write a syntax charts. I'd never taken a course in doing this, but I'd read some books on it and managed to write my own basic. And I'd go down to the club and pass out my schematics. And I'd pass out my code listings, no copyright notices, give it away for free, because our club members were young people, the people like yourselves. It wasn't money people, it wasn't CEOs, it was the people who were technicians that knew computer logic, that wanted their own computer, didn't want the company to own it, and they wanted to prove that if you can program, you can do more for the company than the CEO. And I wanted to help these social dreams come to reality, that kids with an interactive book would now use 100% of their brain instead of 10%. So I gave away my schematics so that everybody in our club could build their own computer. Unfortunately, a lot of people aren't skilled at building things and soldering wires. So Steve Jobs came along then, and he saw the interest in my design, and he said, why don't we start a company, and what we'll do is we'll make a PC board for $20 and sell it for $40 to make life easy for the people who want your computer. And we'd have to invest a certain amount of money, and I didn't think we'd get it back. And he said, yeah, but for once in our lives, the two of us will have our own company. And so I said, well, everything I do belongs to Hewlett-Packard, my employer. I'm never going to leave Hewlett-Packard. I'm going to be an engineer for life. This is an engineering company that respects engineers, that came from engineers. We engineers at the bottom of the org chart actually come up with the new ideas for products. And I implored my company, Hewlett-Packard, to please build a machine that looks like a typewriter, that you can actually run programs on, and they turned me down, the first of 5 turn downs. So Steve and I sold my most valuable possession, my HP 65 calculator. Steve sold something, and we invested in a PC board. The next thing that happened was Steve called me at work one day, and he said, I got an order for $50,000. My salary was $24,000. This was scary. This was like big time. Oh my God, we're more than just a little fun thing at home. So I went back to Hewlett-Packard's legal department. They circulated it. I got turned down again. And we were off into basically starting Apple. We had the garage going for the next half year. It's called the garage. We didn't do any designs in the garage. We didn't do any sales in the garage. The telephone was in Steve's bedroom. It's just that you had to have a place to gather. Our friends would gather and talk about the computer and try out a new program on a bench in the garage. The computers weren't manufactured in the garage. They were manufactured at a place in Santa Clara. We would drive them to the garage, test them, put them in a white box, drive them to the store. As I said, we had no money, Steve and I. So what we got was we had 30 days credit on all the parts to build the computers. Once we got the computers out of Santa Clara and tested them, we drove them to the store and we got paid cash on delivery. So the store was taking the credit. And that's how we were able to run this Apple One thing. It's like sometimes you can have dreams that are far out and cost a lot of money to accomplish. And it might cost, and if you had a little bit less money, you can do a little bit less of that dream. But basically, stick with whatever money you have, do what you can. It's a step forward that will get you onto the other steps. Within, so many people would come by. Steve's dad was always in the garage working with his laser stuff, and his sister, we pay her $1 a board to plug the chips into the socket sometimes. She'd make some money. And that was a lot back then, and she was making a lot of money. And Dan Kottke was a friend who came by, and he learned how to test them and fix some of the problems on the boards. And a couple of high schoolers that we met at the Homebrew Computer Club would come by because they were interested that we had the computer that was going to be affordable. Within 3 months, I designed really a computer from the ground up, the Apple II. And for some reason, it wound up half as many parts, 10 times the computer. Nobody would have ever expected color to be in a computer. It was just a shock to the world that it could be done at an affordable cost in that year. Nobody would have expected graphics. What do I mean by graphics? Well, you could say type a number like 7 into a memory location, and a blue square would pop up on your TV. And instantly you could realize if you just manipulate all the numbers in memory, you can have colors moving around in your set, graphics. We had high resolution, meaning pixels on a screen. That long ago with the Apple II. And we knew that this product was a big winner, so we didn't give it out for free. And we started looking for the money to build it because we knew we could sell 1,000 of them. How do you build 1,000 of them if they cost $250 each to build? You need $250,000. It's like $1 million of today's dollars at least. We went to Commodore and tried to get them to give us a bunch of money. Steve started talking real big money, give us a few $100,000 and give us some jobs and give us some stock. And I was so embarrassed. I'm thinking, how can you ask for that? I mean, my salary's only $25,000. You know, I've designed 2 computers in a year, and it's like just good engineering is all it is. And they turned us down and built their own. Everyone we showed this Apple II to decided to get into the business. We went to Atari. They were friends of ours, but they had their hands full with the first home Pong game, so they turned us down. We went to venture capitalists, and we couldn't speak like businessmen. Neither one of us had any business experience or any business schooling. Like I told you, how young we were. So that didn't go, and we ran into this guy, Mike Marcola. He was an angel, and he came across, he figured that this was going to be a big thing. These computers were going to be the next big explosion in the technical world in terms of money, and we were going to be a huge billion-dollar company in a few months. And he knew how to run business. He'd retired on a stock option, so he would invest in us, but I had to leave Hewlett-Packard. And that was a very difficult decision for me because I decided I wanted to work for Hewlett-Packard for the rest of my life as an engineer. I've designed on the side, just at night. I've designed 2 computers and built them, and cassette tape interfaces. I wrote a BASIC. I did all these other interfaces and stuff, and why don't I just keep doing that on the side and keep my job at Hewlett-Packard as well? And Mike Marcola said, no, I had to leave Hewlett-Packard, and he gave me until Tuesday to decide. And on Tuesday, I was one of those people, I grew up very independent my whole life, and I wasn't going to be influenced by money. So on Tuesday, I turned him down and said, nope, I'm going to stay at Hewlett-Packard and design computers for myself at night. And Steve went into a frenzy, Steve Jobs. He got all my relatives to start calling me, and all my friends, take the money, take the money. And one friend finally said the right thing. He said, look, you can start this new company and be an engineer and stay an engineer, and you don't have to go into management, you don't have to run it, and that's what I was thinking. Because at that point, I was the sort of person that could never really run a company. I couldn't step on other people's toes. I think we're about done, but I'll give a couple of the good highlights real quickly. The Apple II was introduced. Started selling very well, kind of took over this little hobby computer world, but it was a completely built product. Take it out of the box and start typing on it. It used a cassette tape to store your programs. After 1 year, we were allowed personal computers to go to the CES show in Las Vegas. Las Vegas, the city of lights. I'd never been to it. And I wasn't going to be going, but I said in a staff meeting, I said, if we have a floppy disk, can we show it? And Mike Marcola said, yes. That gave me 2 weeks. If I design a floppy disk in 2 weeks, I get to go to Las Vegas. You can't get better motivation than that. The real breakthrough came from a person trying to write a checkbook program with checks month by month and realized that he had really a financial forecasting tool, the first spreadsheet called VisiCalc. Once VisiCalc was out, an Apple II plus VisiCalc to a small businessman that could do their work in 2 hours, 3 hours that would take them 10 years by pencil and paper, and they were just buying them by the hordes, and we were a big, lucky technical success story. After Apple was successful, and I had a plane crash while working on the Macintosh project, I did go back to finish my college, and I came back to Berkeley, and I enrolled over in the main building under a fake name, Rocky Raccoon Clark, to finish my studies, so I got my diploma in that name. And I did other things that I intended my whole life to do. I did go back and I taught 5th grade for 8 years and things like that because just wanted, how do you stay yourself? I'm ready for question and answers. I'm not sure how much time we have left. Probably running a little late. So, thank you. Here's how it works. Okay. Here's how it works. If you have a question, raise your hand, and somebody will bring you a microphone. I'll identify you for them. And it can certainly be current questions. I'm up on all the latest, Apple stuff.
Hi. What advice would you give to new innovators? Because many new companies tend to either boom and then somehow they kind of just fade away and no one hears about them anymore, or they get absorbed by a much bigger company. So what advice would you give to people who kind of have the same passion and dream like you did yourself when you were younger?
Yeah, everybody who's just as smart and passionate and excited about what they're doing doesn't have necessarily the huge big successes like Apple and Google and all that, and you can't expect it, but you got to keep trying. One of the things I wish that a lot of the big companies, once they get successful, even if they buy smaller ones, I wish they could identify the people on the inside that have some neat things going. Why didn't Hewlett-Packard spin me off and just invest? They couldn't do my product. They couldn't do it because of their corporate culture. The corporate culture wasn't open to new products. They had to be finely done engineering, very finished products. But they should have been sensitive to other things that were good. A lot of engineers came to me and said, the Apple II, this is the best product I've ever seen in my life. I mean, they should have found a way to spin it off and own part of it and give it a different name and an ongoing existence. It's not done very much. Hewlett-Packard did one very, very good thing to help the young inside innovators, and it came from Hewlett and Packard themselves in the early days. They had a policy that any engineer who designed something on their own could get parts out of the storeroom for it with their supervisor's approval. So they figured that your intelligence, it was another way of funding your own education. Yeah. Well, we're going to go in whatever order we go in.
Two questions. One of them we talked about when you were on This Week in Twit's podcast at the Apple Store. Where do I get good laser pointers is number one.
The best laser pointers for the best price, dealextreme.com.
Thank you. And
Awful laser pointers in some weird colors, but very expensive, wickedlasers.com or biglasers.com.
cool. And the other question is, what do you see as some of the biggest challenges now in technology and in innovation that engineers and other technology architects need to look at solving? Is it approaches, architectures, or is it a combination thereof?
Yeah, I don't see any real, critical areas. I see we're making big breakthroughs in, especially foldable displays. I think that's going to be great. Maybe we can wear clothes someday or have Google Earth on a real globe. I see things that I like and have my own interests in. Photonics being one of them. I'd love to see little gates, those little decision-making gates, done only with photons, no electricity involved. Run some fiber optics into a chip and fiber optics out, and there's no electricity at all. Love to see that happen because the heat goes away, and you can run a lot faster and not run into the heat problems. Although you have dimension problems. Robotics, I love robotics, and I think in terms of artificial intelligence, how small the steps are that we've taken so far. We always show something off that'll seem impressive, but what if you think about the idea of a robot making a cup of coffee? I could go into your house and make a cup of coffee. You could go into mine and make a cup of coffee, but if you think it out in your head, what it would take, all the steps that you did and how were you able to do it, and part of it's by having made a lot of coffee in your life and been in a lot of kitchens in your life, that robot has got to almost live a long life of learning to be able to do it. You can't program these things directly. Okay.
First of all, I just want to say I respect you very much. You're one of the greatest innovators of all time, I think. Secondly, the question is, how do you view the shift from consumer electronics computers specifically into more consumer media? For example, the iPhone or the iPod. Not that Apple has banned in the Macintosh sector, but there's definitely more of a shift towards that.
Well, you know what? The sort of electronics projects that we have the skills to build have been pretty much consistent. Back in the time of Edison, we may not have had computers so much, but working on telephones, audio, phonographs, movie projection, movie theater, the categories tend to stay the same thing. And so once you have skills in that area and you can think of a good product, how does a company like Apple, come out with something that's not a computer? Think about this. All over the world, music devices were being put out and being manufactured. You could buy them, and you had to transfer the files from a computer. So they were becoming like computer accessories. What Apple did was very strange, and it's in line with Apple's corporate philosophies that carry over to products, which is we try to take all of the geekness, all of the engineering away from the user so they don't have to know any of it. We built the first music device that was not a music device. It didn't have files and structure that you had to learn. You simply plugged it in your computer, and Apple controlled all the elements. Apple could control the experience because they had the store, they had the operating system, they had the application, they had the hardware, they had the iTunes app, and they had the iPod. So you just plugged it in, and invisibly the music was in your ear. You didn't really have to think, and that's a lot of what we do that with. The iPhone is another example of only wanting to make excellent products that you research and you try every approach in the world and just reject them until you get something that is just so outstanding good that anybody would drool over it and say, I have to have it. And that's just, Apple doesn't, Steve Jobs in particular believes that we've only lost money when we built junk that was so lousy we couldn't sell it.
you planning to invent anything new? Are you working on something?
I plan. Yeah, I'm actually always close to people inventing things. Doing the sort of engineering I used to do, I was one of those ones that for 20 hours a day, and I'd wake up in dreams with solutions all the time. I did even in high school for mathematics, for classes, anything. Just go to sleep thinking about it, wake up and write it down. But I can't do that, man. 20 hours a day concentrate on engineering. I have a lot of public appearance stuff to this day. I have family, I have children, I have other duties in the world, and not the time. That's kind of like why the new companies that come out of nowhere, the startups, be it Facebook or whatever, or Google, they come from young people who kind of haven't been there in the system very long. Apple, we came from almost nowhere, and after a while, you just get older and you go into management. It becomes a lot easier. It's difficult to remain a very precise engineer where everything has to be so perfect that nobody can do it better than you. That's a lot of intense, you feel stress and mental work in your head. You can only do it when you're young. So I guide projects now, and I've had a few startup companies working in areas like GPS and remote controls. The first programmable remote controls. I did those just because I wanted to. I love little startups with a few people talking about ideas. Now I like to meet with even high school kids or just out of high school talking about ideas, where to build something. And usually what they're missing, there's so many people now that want to be an entrepreneur and start a company, and they have ideas, but they don't have the engineering and the product done. We were lucky when we started Apple, we had the whole thing.
Oh, hi. Thank you so much for coming today. My question is, what is the joke today?
What's the joke today?
What's your favorite joke? Or
The joke? Oh, let's see. I tend to make up jokes when they come to me. One came to me earlier today, and I can't remember what it was. I said it. Sorry, I played a prank. I told you the prank that I played on my assistant. I played it on actually the engineering professors here. They think that she walked out of her appendectomy today. So, what? Ask Kathy, my comedian friend. You're going to be seeing an awful lot of me in next year's My Life on the D-List reality TV show, Emmy award-winning show. An awful lot. I take her to Bob's Big Boy in Burbank and donate computers to schools in Mexico. We do an awful lot together, yeah. And some big surprises, but I can't say everything. Yeah, she's real smart.
Hi, very, very simple question. Why name your company Apple?
That question comes up all the time. Why are we named Apple? I remember picking Steve Jobs up at the airport in San Francisco when he flew back from Portland, and we're driving down. He says, I got a great name for the company, Apple Computer. And right away, the biggest record company in the world, one of the biggest names that was known to young people our age, was Apple Records for the Beatles. I said, what about Apple Records? And he said, well, they're a record company, we're a computer company. And I said, that's all it takes? And he said, yeah, so I trusted, okay. We both tried to think up strong technical names. Steve himself did. In the car, we would try to think up better names, but nothing would ever beat Apple. Now, when we raised the big money to really start as a real company with the Apple II, we hired a PR agency. The agency came and told us the name Apple has to go because it doesn't speak of power, of computing a lot, of doing a lot of stuff. And Steve and I just held our ground. We said, no, computers are now coming to the homes. They're coming to a new class of people. And an apple is a good symbol in the home. And an apple a day keeps the doctor away. And an apple for the teacher. And apples are fruit, and they're healthy, and they're a great symbol. So we hung on to it, and then we got the PR agency, went into designing logos that we selected. And, so it was, back in those days, there was no big money in this business either. So when there's no big money, any name's okay. If it sounds interesting, that's a good enough reason.
Yeah, not to open a can of worms, but why did Microsoft become who they are, and when are they going to go away?
Well, yeah. What? Alrighty, we'll have one more question after this one, but Microsoft, well, as I mentioned, Bill Gates actually started out as a brilliant programmer, but instantly went into being a businessman, buying something here, selling it for more there with, subscriptions and making a lot of money off that. There was a point in time with our Apple II where we dealt with Microsoft to write some application software for us and a floating point basic for us. And they were very cooperative, and they were much smaller than Apple. We didn't think that much of them at the time. But the world was changing to where software was going to be more important, and you could buy those Intel machines everywhere in the world. Every manufacturer made Intel machines, and only one manufacturer made the Apple II. And so we lost a huge amount of market share due to that. We kept our prices high, and it could have been a mistake, but it could have been the right thing to do. And how can you go back and try to point a finger and say it was right or it was wrong? Microsoft became very big, but they were trying to give the world new tools that it didn't have, computing tools. You know, a lot of people get their best out of it. I mean, when I think of what's the worst thing about Microsoft stuff, well, a lot of people fall in love with Apple stuff. And, you know, if you want to be passionate about the machine you own, like a car, or if you want to feel special, you're probably a Macintosh person. A lot of left brain industries, though, are forced into a PC. You can only get a lot of software for accounting on a PC, for lawyers, legal on a PC, and for engineering. A lot of the software is only on a PC. So that kind of directs you. But your own personal choice, we feel if we keep making good products, people will learn and find out. And of course, I do worry about spam. And like I saw the Slashdot thing last week where somebody was suggesting that if your computer is sending spam because it got taken over by some spammer and it's a zombie, well then you should be taken offline until you can get a certificate, prove yourself, take a test or something that you can manage the operating system you own, because it's all Windows machines, millions of them that the spammers control. One last question.
Okay, I had two questions. One's real quick. I saw on your wrist, what do you have there? Is it a Nixie tube watch?
It's a Nixie tube watch that uses 140 volts on the Nixie tubes, and when I turn my wrist, it shows hours and minutes at the rate I would speak it, and my head loves to read it that way. I actually love it as a watch, not because it's a geek watch, but I'll wear a geek watch for 1 week, and then I'll go back to my pretty hands watch. But this one, I actually like the way it tells time. And I saw somebody wearing one. I looked it up on Google, Nixie tube watch. I found it. I got serial number 14, handmade in America. I like to tell people.
Wow. My other question was, I know with the iPod and the iPhone, there's been a lot of like a sort of battle between people who want to modify the system and Apple, like trying to prevent that, trying to make it into a paid system. What's your opinion on that?
Well, I haven't seen that huge a battle. I'm sorry it exists. I think it should be open. What made the Apple II so successful in the early days, it was an incredibly open machine. We published every schematic and listing and information on how to make your own cards to plug in, how to write your drivers on them, how to add devices, how to write software in many languages. And all these companies, thousands of companies sprung up from little people that never in their life would have a chance to have their own company. Some of them were in high school. And they started writing programs or designing little pieces of hardware, selling it for the Apple II. And it was such a huge market to see the number of just really young and small people that had a chance now to be something in the world. It was an incredible time. And it gets closed down when a company has a product that's not very open. I hope that Apple's SDK leads to a lot more of these, young startups, finding a way to make some nice piece of software for the iPhone. And we can get away from. I hope that they're adequate enough for the masses, that we don't even need the hacking. And I can understand some reasons why you'd have to close up a new product, but I can't understand why you wouldn't let me put a ringtone into my iPhone. I'm not going to destroy the world, or why I can't have stereo Bluetooth. There's some things that, I just as an engineer, it's just, I'm sorry, it doesn't equate. So, good luck with all your products. I love mine. Was outstanding. I never see what the rest of the world sees. hours later with some contraption to go into outer space, or a submarine, or some plasma field to entrap alien presences that we detected with radios. This was, well, we had a curfew, and I couldn't really leave my light on at night, but there was a street light right outside my window. And so there was one place in the corner of the room I could put the book down, lean over the bed, and read it late at night. And that's my favorite memories. And I would say just reading those books, boy, that was my hero. Read, other book inspirations in early days. A book called SOS at Midnight talked about ham radio operators solving a kidnapping and guns and bad guys.
The last page of the book said, anyone of any age can write to this address and get information. You can be a ham radio operator. Well, how neat to be so young, to be in